All right. So today we're going to talk about absolute value functions. So we're going to talk about what they are, what the different pieces are, and then graphing them. Alrighty. So going into the inside of our notes, I'm going to go to the very, very top here where it says absolute value functions are. Absolute value functions are V-shaped, like the letter V. Where the graph comes to a point is called the vertex. So, all of our functions are going to look like V's as opposed to lines or anything else, but this is a new shape for us. And the very, very tip of this, like right here, the tip or the top, or, the very bottom of these shapes is going to be called the vertex. So a really, really basic one that we can do is going to be this one over here. This is the standard. This is the very, very most basic version of this. And it's called the parent function. Parent function. Because all of the other absolute value functions come from this. Oh my goodness. That's an error. There we go. So what this looks like on the graph, since we don't really have any given numbers, we're going to start at 0, 0. And our slope is going to be 1 over 1. Now, typically, this is what our line would look like, and we would stop. However, we need this to look like a V. So what we're going to do is the same exact line, but over here. So we're going to do the same move. I'm still going to go up 1 over 1. Still going to do that. But instead of going to the right, I'm going to go to the left instead. So it looks something like this. This is our parent function for our absolute value functions. This is where they all start at. And then from there, we can change it to look different and do different things. So I'm going to slide over here where it says the vertex form of an absolute value function. It transforms the basic absolute value graph. So that basic graph that we saw before, that parent function, it's going to transform this to look a different way. So we can plug in different numbers for A, H, and K to move it and shape it. So this actually should look familiar to us because we've seen this before. Only last time, instead of absolute value bars, it had parentheses. This is our HK form for our lines. So this is really, really similar to graphing our lines, but instead of a line, it's going to be a V shape. So each of these different parts is going to do something different. So let's find out what those are. Let's start with the A first. So A is going to be our very, very first number, right in front of our absolute value bars. So what they did was put in 1/4 here. And we're going to see how it changed from our parent function to this one. Now, looking at this is kind of like way wider than the other one. So that tells me that this might have something to do with our slope. So let's see. In our parent function, the slope was 1 over 1. Okay. Well, in the other one, it's going to be up 1 over 4, it looks like. Well, that's up 1 over 4. So that is our slope. And it kind of like opened up to be pretty wide. So I'm going to say that's the slope. And it got wider. That is what I'm noticing, is that it opened up more. Okay, well, let's take a look at the next one. We have a -4 over 3. Okay, well, I see that's the slope right here. We can tell that we went down 4 over 3. But it's kind of facing the totally opposite direction, right? Instead of pointing upwards, this one points down. We also have a negative sign here. So That negative is going to tell us that this is reflected or flipped or whatever you'd like to say to show that instead of pointing up like this one, it's pointing down. All right, let's take a look at the next one. So now we have 2 over 1 as our slope. Because remember, if it's just a whole number, you could put it over 1. Now, what did that do to the graph? Because this is where we started. And this is how it changed. So it looks like it got narrower. So it got narrower. It got like thinner. Interesting. Well, why is this one narrower and thinner, but that first one was really wide? Well, I'm taking a look at our numbers here. I see this is a fraction, 1 over 4. That's kind of small. 2 is definitely bigger than that. So if we have a slope that's a fraction that is smaller than 1, or small in general, it'll be wider than a slope that is a bigger number. So our A is going to control how thin or how wide our function is. So over here, that's what we're going to write. Patterns that we noticed. That A is going to be our slope. And that if it gets wider, that means it's going to have a small number as its slope. And it's going to be something big like this. It gets thinner when it has a bigger number. And it's going to be something kind of like this, where it's thin, like it's been stretched out. And that is what our slope is going to do. It's going to control how big or small our opening is. Okay, so that's A. Let's take a look at H. All right, so H is the number that is going to be inside of our absolute value bars along with our X. It is either being added or subtracted to X. So let's take a look at this and see what happened. Let's see, so this is our original, that's our parent function. And what happened? It looks like we moved over here. It just kind of slid. It did a slide over to positive 2, it looks like. But that's interesting, though, because we already have a negative 2 here. But we moved right 2 units. Okay. Let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so we started out over here and then moved 3, but that's in the negative direction, so we moved over to negative 3, but we started out with a positive 3. We moved left 3 units, even though we already had a positive number. Okay, well, that's opposite. And it looks like this one is too, because we're starting over here and then moving to positive 1, even though we have a negative 1 in our formula. So that's telling me that H is opposite of what it gives you. And that's the same as it was for our HK formula back when we were doing our lines. H is always going to be opposite, so be very, very careful about that. It's also telling me that H is either moving to the left or to the right. And that's going to be based on if it's positive or negative. Because all the rest of these, it looks like we had positive 2, but we started out with a negative number, so that's opposite. And then all 3 of these are just doing slides from either the left or the right. So that's all that H does, is move it from side to side. Okay, let's take a look at our last piece. That's going to be K. All right. K is going to be a number that is on the outside of your absolute value bars, on the very end. So what's going on here? Looks like we started with our parent function down at the bottom, and then we moved up. Nothing else changed, just slid upwards. Okay, so that's another type of slide. So we slid up 2 units, and we started out with a +2. Okay, that makes sense. Went up. All right, what about the next one? Let's see. We started up here, and then we moved down. Looks like 5 units, which makes sense because that's a -5, so it moved down. Okay, and then let's see. Again, we're moving down, and that's a -3. We started with a -3. Okay, that makes sense. So what is our K doing? It looks like K moves either up or down. If it moves up, that means it's a positive number. If it moves down, that means it's a negative number. Cool. So that's our A, H, and K. Those are all the pieces that we need for our formula. We just have to be careful and remember what each of them do. Keep in mind, your A is your slope. It's going to tell you how wide or how thin your function is going to be. H is opposite every single time, and it just moves from left to right. Make sure that your left is positive and your right is negative. And K is going to move us up or down. Either way, depending on what sign it has. Up if it's positive, down if it's negative. Okay, so let's practice a couple of these. We only did 2 of these in class, so we're probably only going to do 2 here as well. Alrighty, so this is our first piece. This is combining everything that we just learned. We need an A, an H, and a K. So let's identify those things first. So A is going to be our first number here, but there's nothing there. We have an invisible number. It's going to be a -1. A is going to be -1 over 1, because remember, that's your slope, so you want to make it look like a slope. Okay, now we need our H. So H is going to be our middle number. H is +2, but remember, you want to read that as the opposite. So it's actually going to be -2. And then we have K. K is going to be a -3, and K just stays the same. Nothing changes there. Okay, so let's start by graphing our vertex. Remember, that's the very, very tip of your function. The H and the K are going to tell us where we need to go for that. So we said H is -2, and it moves side to side. K is -3, and it moves up and down. So let's start with our H here. We got -2. Okay, so I'm going to go over to -2, and then using my K, I'm going to go down 3. Right here. This is where our spot, or where our vertex is going to be. That is our starting point. Okay, now we have A. A is -1 over 1. So that's our slope. For our slope, if it's negative, remember you're going to go down and then over. Down and then over. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. So we're going to have a point here and here. But remember, we are not quite done yet. We still need to have this in a V shape, so it needs to go to the other side as well. You're still going to do the same exact move, but instead of going to the right, you're going to go to the left. We're still going down 1 over 1, just in the other direction. So we're here and here. Then all we have to do is connect our dots. And we're good. That is our absolute value function. All right, let's take a look at number 2. Okay, we're still going to do the same thing. We still need to find our A, H, and K first. That is your very first move. So let's see. A is going to be our very first number. That's going to be 3. H. Nothing here. So your h has to be inside of your absolute value bars. If there is nothing but an x inside, that means your h is actually equal to 0, and we don't have one. So for our h, we just don't have that. But we do still have a k, because our k is going to be on the outside of those absolute value bars. We do have that. So instead of moving side to side here, we're just going to move up and down. And for this one, since it's positive 5, we're just going to be moving up to 5 spaces right there. Cool. All right, now we just need our slope. That is -3 over 1. So we're going to go down 3 over 1. Down 3 over 1. Down 3 over 1. Cool. All right, we're not done yet because we still want that V shape, so we have to go down the other way. We're going to do the same move, down 3, but we're going to go over to the other side. Down 3 over 1. Down 3 over 1. Cool. Connect your dots. And there's our absolute value function. Okay, let's do just one more, and then I'm going to leave the rest to you. So let's do number 3. All right, so A, H, and K, those need to come up first. All right, so A is going to be our first number, but there's nothing there. So if it's invisible, we got a 1. Remember, this is only for your slope. If you don't see your H or K, that means it's 0. If you don't see a slope, that means it's 1. All right, so let's find our H. That's going to be this one here. That's -4, but remember, we want the opposite of that, so it's actually going to be a +4. And then for K, we have +2. All right, so using our H and K, we're going to find our starting point or our vertex. So we're going to go over 4, up 2. So we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, up 1, 2, right here. That's our vertex. Okay, cool. Now we just use our slope to build our V. So it's 1 over 1. So we're going to go up 1 over 1. Right there. Ran out of space, but we could still go the other way. So we're going to go up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1. And then connect your dots. All right. We are good. So we have 4, 5, and 6 left. I would love for you to do those for practice if you haven't already. But that's all I got for absolute value. Let me know if you have questions. Bye.